It was one of those late summer afternoons where the heat just clings to you, thick and heavy, like a blanket you can't shake off. Roy Sanders had just finished a long week at his job and was finally back home, ready for some peace and quiet. His neighborhood was the kind of place folks moved to for safety, a suburban stretch of identical houses and carefully mowed lawns, where the biggest drama usually involved a neighbor's dog barking too late at night. Roy didn't stand out much on purpose. He kept to himself, smiled politely when he needed to, blended in. But that day, standing on the sidewalk in front of his own house, keys in one hand, grocery bag in the other, he noticed a man marching toward him, fast and full of purpose. Cargo shorts, clipboard, a smug kind of energy. The guy looked like a mall cop on a power trip. "Excuse me, sir," he barked, flashing a badge that looked about as real as a cereal box toy. "You don't belong here. This is a private community." Roy blinked, caught between disbelief and exhaustion. "I live here," he said calmly, his voice steady. But the man didn't even flinch, just stepped closer, chest puffed up like a rooster. "I'm with the Homeowners Association," he declared, "and I'm placing you under citizens' arrest for trespassing." Roy set the groceries down slowly, his fingers curling into fists at his sides. In the distance, sprinklers clicked on, misting the air. A crow cawed somewhere overhead, the whole street hanging in a weird, tense silence. Roy had dealt with a lot in his life, but this was about to get real messy, real fast. His voice dropped to a whisper. "You really don't want to do this. And if you've ever been mistaken for someone you're not, you'll want to stick around for what happened next. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from." The fake HOA officer didn't even blink. He lunged forward, reaching clumsily for Roy's wrist like he actually thought he could slap on a pair of cuffs. Roy stepped back instinctively, his body tensing, his training kicking in like muscle memory. For a split second, he considered his options. Let it play out? Escalate it? End it quick? Roy wasn't just any guy in a t-shirt and jeans. He was an FBI field agent, trained to read threats and neutralize them fast. But here he was, standing in front of his own house, being treated like a criminal because he didn't look like he belonged. The man with the fake badge growled, "Don't make this harder than it has to be." He waved a walkie-talkie around like it was a real weapon, barking into it for backup that wasn't coming. A few curious neighbors peeked out from behind their curtains. Some whispering, some just watching like it was a show. Roy could feel their stares burning holes into him. He let out a slow breath, forcing his voice to stay calm. "Look, man, I'm telling you." But before he could finish, the fake cop tried to grab him again, this time shoving at his shoulder. The groceries spilled onto the ground, apples bouncing into the street, a carton of eggs cracking open in a sad little mess. Something deep inside Roy tightened, a feeling he knew too well. The look in this guy's eyes, the way he moved, the way the neighborhood just stood there. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was personal. This was about power. Roy's hand hovered near the badge tucked deep in his back pocket. The real one. But he held back. Not yet. Not yet. First, he needed to see just how far this man was willing to go, and the answer? Way further than anyone could have guessed. Roy squared his shoulders and took a firm step back, planting his feet like he was anchoring himself to the earth. "Last warning," he said, his voice low but sharp enough to cut glass. "Back off." But the fake cop just laughed, a nervous, twitchy sound, like he knew he was in too deep but couldn't find a way out. He yanked a cheap pair of plastic cuffs from his belt and lunged again, this time grabbing Roy's wrist. And that was it. Roy moved without thinking, spinning, locking the man's arm behind his back in one smooth motion. The clipboard clattered to the pavement. "Ow! Hey, man, that's assault." The guy yelped, trying to twist free. Roy leaned in, his breath steady against the side of the man's face. "You just attempted to detain a federal agent," he said quietly. "Congratulations. You just committed a felony." The fake officer's face drained of color, his eyes darting frantically toward the street. More neighbors had gathered now, some stepping outside onto their porches, others murmuring in shock. A few even started recording with their phones. I'm just doing my job," the guy stammered. "You're trespassing. You're resisting HOA authority." Roy tightened his grip just slightly. Not enough to hurt, just enough to remind him who was actually in control. "Buddy," Roy said, almost feeling sorry for him, "there's no such thing as an HOA police department." He reached into his back pocket, pulled out his real badge, and held it up right in front of the guy's wide, terrified eyes. "Roy Sanders, FBI. You're under arrest for impersonating an officer." For a heartbeat, the whole street froze. Someone gasped. Somewhere, a kid dropped their ice cream. And just like that, the so-called officer realized exactly how bad he had just messed up. The fake cop started squirming, his face turning a blotchy red as he sputtered nonsense, throwing out excuses like a drowning man grasping for anything to stay afloat. Wait. Man, this is all a misunderstanding. I thought. Roy cut him off with a cold look. "Save it." He reached for his phone, thumbing in a quick call. "Dispatch, this is Agent Sanders. I've got a suspect in custody for impersonating law enforcement. Need local PD at my location." The guy's eyes widened even further. He started pulling against Roy's hold, panic setting in now, fast and sloppy. "Come on, man, we can work this out. Just let me go. I didn't mean anything by it. It's just a neighborhood watch thing." Roy shook his head slowly. Neighborhood watch doesn't come with fake badges, cuffs, or the right to put hands on people. The minutes dragged on, heavy and awkward, as they waited. Neighbors whispered from their porches, some backing away into their houses, suddenly not so eager to watch now that things were serious. A few braver ones lingered, phones still recording, faces a mix of curiosity and fear. Sirens pierced the humid afternoon air, growing louder by the second. The fake cop's breathing turned ragged. He knew it was too late. "You're going to ruin my life," he choked out, voice breaking. Roy's grip didn't loosen. "You did that yourself." As the police cruiser pulled up, the man made one last desperate move, twisting and trying to break free. Roy shifted easily, pinning him against the side of a parked car with effortless precision. Two uniformed officers jumped out, hands hovering near their holsters, taking the scene with wide, surprised eyes. Roy flashed his credentials again, nodding toward the squirming mess pinned to the hood. "You're going to want to hear what he was trying to pull." The first officer, a young guy with sandy hair and a cautious look, approached slowly. His partner, older, heavier, with a mustache that screamed small-town cop, hung back by the squad car, muttering something into his radio. The young officer squinted at Roy's badge, then at the fake cop, then back at Roy again. "Sir, just to confirm, you're with the Bureau?" Roy nodded once, crisp and sure. "Special Agent Roy Sanders. Badge number's legit. You can verify it." The young officer gave a quick, stiff nod and stepped aside to call it in. Meanwhile, the fake cop, still half pinned against the car, was trembling, his mouth running a mile a minute. "You don't understand, man. I was told you were dangerous. They said there was a threat in the neighborhood. I was trying to help." Roy's eyes narrowed. "Who told you that?" The man opened his mouth, then shut it, looking like he might be sick. Across the street, Roy caught a flicker of movement. A familiar figure ducking quickly behind a half-closed curtain. Mrs. Pennington, HOA president, nosy neighbor, queen of the neighborhood watch. And suddenly, everything clicked into place. She had put this guy up to it, fed him lies, whipped him up into thinking Roy didn't belong, made him feel like he was doing some kind of public service. Roy's jaw tightened. This wasn't random. It was coordinated. The fake cop wasn't just an overzealous idiot. He was a pawn. And somewhere behind a lace-curtained window, someone was trying real hard to pretend their hands were clean. Roy turned back to the officers. "You might want to send another unit," he said quietly. "There's more going on here than a simple case of impersonation." The younger officer's face grew serious. He nodded into his radio. Across the street, Mrs. Pennington's curtain fluttered and then snapped shut. As the second patrol unit rolled up, Roy could feel the atmosphere on the street shift, tighten almost. Some neighbors retreated behind their doors completely, pretending not to see anything. Others lingered at their windows, their faces a strange mix of fear, curiosity, and guilt. Roy handed the fake cop off to the officers, who cuffed him properly this time, reading his rights as he sobbed into the hot afternoon air. But Roy wasn't done, not even close. He crossed the street slowly, the loose gravel crunching under his boots. His heart hammered steady and hard, like a war drum in his chest. He could see Mrs. Pennington peeking out again, her hands trembling as she clutched her floral curtains. Roy stopped at the edge of her lawn, kept his voice low, so only she could hear. "You want to tell me," he said, his voice cutting the silence cleanly, "why you sent a fake officer after me?" The curtain shivered. The door cracked open an inch, just enough for Mrs. Pennington's pale face to peek out. I didn't mean for it to go that far," she stammered. "We were just concerned. You didn't attend the neighborhood meetings. You kept to yourself. We didn't know who you were." Roy shook his head slowly. "So you assumed the worst?" Her mouth opened, closed. No words came. He let the silence stretch until it hurt. "You saw a black man move in," Roy said, voice steady but laced with the kind of tired anger that comes from a lifetime of holding it back. "And you decided he didn't belong. You didn't bother asking. You sent some fool to arrest me in front of my own house." Behind him, he could hear the fake cop still sobbing into the back seat of the patrol car. He didn't turn around. Didn't need to. The real damage had already been done, and it ran deeper than any pair of cheap plastic handcuffs ever could. Roy didn't wait for an apology. He just turned and walked back to his house, each step heavier than the last. The weight of it all, the violation, the humiliation, the sheer audacity, settled in his bones like lead. Once inside, he closed the door gently, methodically locked it, and stood there for a long moment with his forehead resting against the cool wood. He could hear the muffled sounds of the neighborhood outside, sirens dying off in the distance, low murmurs of neighbors scattering like cockroaches in the sudden light. He needed to act, not out of anger, but because if he didn't, it would happen again. Maybe not to him, maybe to someone else. Someone without the badge, someone without the training to handle it. Roy crossed his kitchen table, flipping open a leather binder tucked neatly inside a drawer. It held everything he needed: contacts, procedures, legal codes. He wasn't just a field agent. He was a man who understood how systems worked and how to hold people accountable when they weaponized fear. He picked up his phone and called his bureau supervisor first, giving a full debrief of the incident. The voice on the other end grew colder by the minute. "We'll be launching an official inquiry," his supervisor said. "Impersonating federal law enforcement is no joke. Neither is racially motivated harassment." Next, Roy called the local police department's internal affairs division. They agreed to send a community liaison officer out the following week. And finally, he placed a call to the city council, requesting a formal review of the neighborhood HOA's leadership practices. Roy knew it wouldn't be quick, and it wouldn't be easy. People like Mrs. Pennington thrived in the cracks between laws and good intentions. But this time, she wasn't going to slither away unseen. Not on his watch. Word spread fast, faster than Roy expected. Within days, a notice hit every mailbox in the neighborhood. A mandatory HOA meeting had been scheduled, topic undisclosed. But everyone knew what it was about. You could feel a humming in the air, the unease, the tension, the way people avoided eye contact at the grocery store. On the night of the meeting, Roy showed up early, his FBI credentials tucked neatly away but ready, just in case. He wasn't here as an agent tonight. He was here as a neighbor, a man demanding answers. The community center was packed, the low murmur of voices blending into a nervous buzz. Mrs. Pennington stood at the front of the room, clutching a clipboard like it might shield her from what was coming. Her smile was brittle, stretched too tight. "We're here to address recent incidents," she began, her voice quivering slightly. "There's been misunderstandings." Roy rose slowly from his chair, every eye snapping toward him. He didn't yell. He didn't need to. His voice cut through the room, measured, controlled. "A man impersonated law enforcement. He assaulted me on my own property. And he did it because lies were spread, because of assumptions made about who belongs and who doesn't." A few heads bowed. A few others turned red with shame. Roy's eyes locked onto Mrs. Pennington's. "This isn't just a misunderstanding," he said quietly. "It's a crime, and there will be consequences." For a long, trembling moment, No one spoke. Then, from the back of the room, a woman's voice rose, steady and clear. "I move to remove Mrs. Pennington from the HOA board." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Mrs. Pennington's face crumpled, her clipboard slipping from her grasp with a hollow clatter. Roy didn't gloat. He simply sat back down, folded his hands neatly in his lap. Justice, he thought, has a sound, and sometimes it's the sound of a room finally waking up. The vote was almost immediate. Paper ballots passed from hand to hand in stiff, embarrassed silence. Roy stayed seated, watching it unfold like someone observing the aftermath of a storm, detached but deeply, deeply tired. When the results were read aloud, an overwhelming majority in favor of removing Mrs. Pennington from her position. No one cheered. No one clapped. It wasn't that kind of victory. It was heavy, messy, necessary. Mrs. Pennington gathered her things with trembling hands, her face blotchy and stunned. She didn't look at Roy as she left, just kept her eyes on the ground, disappearing out the door without a word. Some neighbors tried to approach Roy after the meeting, mumbling apologies, offering handshakes, trying to bridge the wide, broken spaces between them. He accepted their words politely, but with a reserved nod. Forgiveness wasn't something you threw around like confetti. It had to be earned. Over the next few weeks, the neighborhood changed, not overnight and not easily. Some people remained distant, uncomfortable with the mirror that had been held up to them, but others made small, meaningful efforts. Invitations to community events started appearing in Roy's mailbox, not just out of politeness, but with genuine attempts at inclusion. One afternoon, while trimming his hedges, an elderly neighbor walked over with a plate of cookies and a shy smile. We're glad you're here, Mr. Sanders," she said, voice cracking a little. "We're sorry it took so long for some of us to show it." Roy accepted the plate, feeling the tiniest crack in the armor around his heart. Maybe change wasn't always loud. Maybe it was slow, stubborn, but possible. And maybe, just maybe, the next time someone new moved into this neighborhood, they wouldn't have to fight the same battles he did. Maybe the world would be a little bit better, because he stood his ground. The summer bled into fall, and the heat finally loosened its grip on the town. Roy found himself spending more time outside again, sitting on the front porch with a book, waving to passing neighbors who now stopped to chat instead of scurry past. Life hadn't magically turned perfect. There were still whispers sometimes, still moments when he caught guarded looks out of the corner of his eye. But something had shifted, something real. The street didn't feel hostile anymore. It felt like his. One crisp Saturday morning, Roy grabbed a cup of coffee and stepped outside just in time to see a young black family unloading boxes from a U-Haul 2 houses down. A little boy chased after a soccer ball that bounced loose, his laughter cutting through the cool air. Roy smiled to himself, set down his coffee, and walked over. "Need a hand?" he asked the father, who looked up with a mix of relief and surprise. "Would appreciate it," the man said, grinning, as they lifted a heavy couch together. Roy caught a few of the other neighbors peeking out from their windows, but this time they didn't turn away. A few even wandered over, offering help, introductions, plates of homemade cookies. Roy saw it happening, the slow stitching together of something broken, and he realized he wasn't just witnessing it. He was part of it. That night, sitting on his porch under the sky, so clear it looked like glass, Roy leaned back in his chair, feeling something he hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. True peace. Not the kind you're given, but the kind you carve out for yourself, inch by stubborn inch. The battle hadn't been easy. It hadn't been clean, but it had mattered. He took a long sip of his coffee, letting the night settle around him like a blanket. Home, he thought. Finally, home.